Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Adam Miles and I'm a personal development coach. And today I wanted to share with you one of the essays that I recently wrote and distributed. I hope you find this useful. It's about relationships and why they can be so hard. Let's jump right in. What makes relationships hard and so worth it? Most people do not enter relationships expecting them to be as difficult as they often are. We anticipate closeness, companionship, and understanding. We expect warmth, support, and a sense of being known. Even when we believe we are being realistic, there is usually a quiet hope that relationship will make life feel more manageable, that someone else will help smooth the rough edges of existence, and that love will feel, if not easy, then at least reassuring. When that does not happen, when intimacy begins to feel frustrating, activating, or exhausting, many people assume something has gone wrong. Either they chose the wrong partner, or they themselves are ill-equipped for a relationship. Difficulty is interpreted as evidence of failure rather than as something intrinsic to closeness itself. But what if the difficulty is not a sign of dysfunction at all? What if it's not something to be fixed or avoided, but something essential to the process? This essay is not about communication strategies, attachment styles, or how to get your needs met more effectively. It's about why real relationships press on our most sensitive places, why they expose parts of us that we thought we had outgrown, and why, despite all of this, they remain one of the most meaningful and transformative experiences available to us. Relationships are hard not because we are doing them wrong, but because they bring us into sustained contact with parts of ourselves that prefer to remain unseen. And they are worth it not because they spare us from discomfort, but because they offer one of the few environments capable of transforming fear rather than reinforcing it. Part 1. The expectation and the reality of relationship. At the beginning of most relationships, there is a period of alignment. Needs feel met, differences seem manageable, and there is a sense of being understood and chosen. Even when we know this phase will not last forever, it quietly establishes an expectation about how closeness should feel. Over time, that expectation hardens into something like an unspoken contract. We fit. We get each other. This should continue. When friction inevitably appears, it is often experienced as a breach of that contract. The question arises, sometimes silently, sometimes aloud, what changed? The disappointment extends beyond the conflict itself and includes the loss of an imagined future in which closeness felt easier and required less effort. Rather than recognizing the difficulty as an inherent feature of intimacy, it is often interpreted as evidence that something has gone wrong. Attention turns towards fixing the relationship or fixing the other person. Better communication is sought, more effort is applied, boundaries are adjusted, and when these attempts fail to restore the earlier ease, doubt creeps in about the relationship itself. What rarely comes under examination is the assumption beneath all of this that closeness should make life easier. In practice, closeness tends to do something quite different. It amplifies. It brings unresolved patterns into sharper focus and exposes the way that we manage fear, disappointment, and vulnerability. Sustained proximity does not simply reveal compatibility, it reveals coping strategies. Many of the behaviors that generate tension in relationships are not deliberate choices. They are automatic responses shaped long before the current relationship existed. A raised voice, a sudden withdrawal, a need to be right, or a wave of resentment that feels justified in the moment are often attempts to regulate internal discomfort rather than responses to the present situation alone. This helps explain why relational conflict so often feels disproportionate. The intensity rarely matches the immediate issue. What is being touched is older, deeper, and more charged than the surface disagreement suggests. From the outside, this can look like stubbornness or immaturity, but from the inside, it feels like survival. The nervous system does not carefully distinguish between emotional threat and physical danger. When something registers as risk, the impulse is not reflection, but protection. As a result, relationships become environments where control, often disguised as reason or necessity, quietly takes center stage. Seen this way, it becomes less surprising that relationships feel difficult. What becomes surprising is how often we expect them not to be. When we enter relationships believing they exist primarily to soothe us, friction feels like betrayal. When we understand that they also exist to reveal ourselves, the struggle takes on a different meaning. This does not make the relationship easier, but it does make them more intelligible, and sometimes intelligibility is the first form of relief. Part 2. The Primitive Mind and Modern Relationships. To understand why relationships activate us so deeply, it helps to remember that much of our internal wiring was shaped long before modern relationships existed in their current form. At a primitive level, connection was not primarily about fulfillment or self-expression. It was about survival. To belong was to remain protected, and to be excluded was to become vulnerable. Acceptance meant access to safety and resources, while rejection carried real risk. That legacy did not disappear as relationships became more emotionally nuanced. It moved beneath the surface. Today, we speak the language of love and partnership, but beneath that language operates an older system continually scanning for threat and safety. Questions such as, am I seen? Am I valued? Am I secure? Am I at risk of being dismissed or abandoned? Arise automatically, often before conscious thought intervenes. When these concerns are activated, the body responds first. The impulse is not curiosity, but regulation. This is where control enters the picture. Control is one of the primary ways the nervous system attempts to manage fear. When the environment feels unpredictable, the impulse is to make it more predictable. Agreement becomes calming. Compliance feels reassuring. And over time, having things go a certain way begins to masquerade as getting our needs met. But not all needs are the same. Some are preferences, some are attempts to reduce discomfort in the moment, and some are far older. There are needs that were never fully adequately met when they first arose. Needs for safety, attention, consistency, or emotional presence. They had no reliable place to land. Rather than disappearing, they froze. Frozen needs do not present themselves clearly. They surface through urgency, rigidity, or emotional reactions that feel disproportionate to the moment. They are activated not only by what is happening now, but how closely the present resembles earlier experiences of dependency or loss. This is why relationships can feel so consuming. When a frozen need is activated, it does not feel like a request, it feels like a demand. Not because the other person owes us something, but because deprivation is registered as danger. Perspective narrows, Flexibility drops away, and the desire to be understood hardens into insistence. What might otherwise be navigated with openness begins to feel non-negotiable. These reactions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a nervous system doing what it has learned to do to maintain equilibrium. Control is not chosen because it's admirable, but because it works, at least temporarily. The problem is that what regulates fear in the short term often creates suffering in the long term. When control becomes the organizing principle of a relationship, intimacy erodes. The more one person tightens their grip, the less room there is for genuine encounter. Resistance grows, distance follows, and the original fear is reinforced rather than relieved. From the inside, this rarely looks like fear. It looks like reason. It looks like necessity. This is the quiet tragedy at the center of many relationships. Two people, each attempting to feel safe, end up amplifying the very conditions that make safety impossible. Part 3. Control, conflict, and the illusion of having it our way. When fear is active in a relationship, it rarely announces itself as fear. It arrives wearing more respectable language. It sounds like reason or standards, like, I just need you to understand, or this shouldn't be so hard. Control rarely presents itself as domination. It presents itself as necessity. Most relational conflict does not originate in cruelty or indifference. It emerges from an inability to tolerate a particular internal state: frustration, helplessness, vulnerability, or uncertainty. Conflict becomes a way of discharging that comfort outward. This is why so many arguments feel circular. The subject matter shifts, but the emotional energy remains the same. And the disagreement becomes less about the issue itself and more about restoring a sense of stability. Control is easily framed as responsibility, insistence becomes clarity, and rigidity passes as self-respect. We tell ourselves we are standing for something important when we are often standing against a feeling that we cannot tolerate. This is not a moral failing, it's a physiological one. When the nervous system perceives threat, curiosity diminishes and nuance disappears. Compromise begins to feel like erasure, and the goal shifts from understanding to relief. But the relief control offers is temporary. Compliance may quiet anxiety for a moment, but it erodes trust over time. And as control increases, intimacy thins. Relationships become exhausting not because of closeness, but because of constant management. Conversations feel charged, ordinary moments take on disproportionate significance, and the system organizes around regulation rather than connection. Control and closeness move in opposite directions. The tighter the grip, the less space remains for genuine encounter. Letting go of control does not mean abandoning values or silencing needs. It means learning to distinguish between truth and fear, between presence and insistence. When control loosens, space returns, not because fear disappears, but because it is no longer in charge. And this is where healing begins. Part 4. Frozen needs and why intimacy reawakens them. Not all reactions in relationships originate in the present moment. Some arise from needs formed long ago when we had little capacity to name them or meet them. When a need is repeatedly unmet, it does not disappear, it freezes, along with the emotional charge that accompanied it. Frozen needs surface indirectly through urgency, rigidity, or emotional reactions that feel disproportionate to the moment. Intimacy activates these places by creating conditions that resemble earlier dependency. A partner becomes a focal point not because they caused the wound, but because they are close enough to touch it. This can be deeply confusing. A delayed response can feel like abandonment, and a disagreement can feel like rejection. These reactions feel exact from the inside, even if it appears to be excessive from the outside. Frozen needs do not heal through self-criticism or control. They heal through awareness and toleration, when emotional charge can be felt without having to act it out or be urgently resolved. Healing does not occur when a present partner is made responsible for the past. It occurs when the individual remains present to activation without collapsing into it or discharging it outward. This distinction matters. A relationship can activate a wound without being tasked with repairing it. And when this distinction is missed, intimacy becomes strained and unsustainable. When it becomes conscious, intensity does not disappear, but it becomes intelligible. The relationship is relieved of an impossible task, and the different responsibility emerges, the responsibility to remain aware. Part 5, The Crucible, Why Relationships Feel Like Fire. A crucible is a vessel designed to withstand extreme heat. It exists not to preserve what is placed inside of it, but to transform it. Intimate relationships function in much the same way. They expose the strategies we rely on to manage fear and maintain identity: control, withdrawal, self-righteousness, old grief, and fear disguised as certainty. These are not defects created by the relationship. They are adaptations exposed by closeness. This exposure can feel brutal. The self we believe ourselves to be begins to unravel, and the tools that once provided stability lose their effectiveness. This is why relational pain often feels existential. Something familiar is being relinquished, and the fire of intimacy begins to challenge identity itself. This is the moment many people mistake for failure. They assume something is broken because comfort has disappeared. In reality, this is often the point at which transformation becomes possible. The crucible refines through sustained exposure, not reassurance. When the fire is not fled, something subtle begins to shift. Control softens, urgency loosens, and intensity gives way to steadiness. What remains is capacity, the capacity to stay present without control, to tolerate uncertainty, and to love without grasping. This is the gold that remains after the fire has done its work. Part 6. Why so many people opt out or stay but go numb. Some leave relationships when the heat rises. Others stay but disengage emotionally, and still others intellectualize, mistaking insight for transformation. These responses are not moral failures. They are attempts to restore equilibrium. Avoidance provides relief, but it preserves the very patterns that cause suffering. What is avoided does not disappear, it waits. Discernment matters, and some relationships should be left. But leaving primarily to escape discomfort trades short-term relief for long-term repetition. The fire will be encountered again. Part 7. Why it's still worth it. Relationships do not promise happiness or ease. They offer something more durable. They build capacity by teaching us to remain present without gripping, to tolerate discomfort without control, and to meet reality without retreat. A relationship worth its weight does not ask little of us. It calls something forth. Over time, fear loosens its grip, presence deepens, and love becomes less conditional. This change is not dramatic, it's quiet, showing up as steadiness where there was once urgency, and curiosity where there was once certainty. Relationships are worth it not because they spare us from difficulty, but because they make difficulty meaningful. The question shifts from, why is this so hard, to what is this asking of me? And sometimes that shift is enough. Thank you so much for your attention to this essay, and I really hope you got something useful out of it. Check out my other videos on this channel if you're interested in this kind of content. And until I see you next time, so long and take care.